going to visit some family up north.
That's great. All right. We're good to go. So you'll know when I start because I'll do the whole intro and then I'll pass over to you.
Awesome.
To Climate Australia. I am your host, Lee Constable, and I want to start, as we always do, acknowledging country, but I want to actually pass to my guest first, Justine Dillon, to tell me about the country that you're joining us from today.
Hi everyone, I'm Justine Dillon. My traditional country is Kumameri, Noonuccal, Noogie country. So Kumameri is the Gold Coast area, Noonuccal is North Stradbroke Island and Moreton, and Noogie is Moreton Island. So I'd like to welcome everybody today from my Kumameri country where I work and live, and acknowledge my elders past, present and emerging as they hold the hopes, culture, traditions and memories of our people. Thanks
so much. And I'm joining you all from Yugara country here, north of where Justine is. This is the land of the Ningi people, but also a lot of other peoples have been part of this land here. It's now called Red Cliff, but it's on the Kondamuka coast. So basically, when we acknowledge country, we're talking about not just First Nations here in Australia, but acknowledging as well that we have people from all over the world. So as I said before we went into the recording, if you are there, whether you're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or here in CimpaticoTV, say hello and let us know where you are. And if you do know, which I hope you'll know or find out, let us know what First Nations land you're on when you're watching this today. We'd love to hear from you. So Justine, I just wanted to ask you first, about your story, because you've obviously grown up in the region and you've gone into education and now you're in land management and cultural heritage and all those things together. So what's your story?
So I've grown up on the Gold Coast 34 years now, lived mainly in the northern suburbs. My family, we spent every Saturday from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. fishing along the Broadwater at Paradise Point, Runaway Bay and Coomera Lakelands and the areas. Most of the weekends that was to feed our family, to get through payments, because we're a low socioeconomic family. Although we did save up and go to North Stradbroke Island every school holidays that we could to connect to our family and country over there. So my father and mother ensured that we kept that connection very strong, and to this day I still try and take my daughter every school holidays when I have time to visit the family. Either that or I drop her over there to the family so I can keep working. So both my parents were studying while we were in primary school, my brother and I. That showed us that education was the key to get out of those cycles and to better our lives for healthier, better understandings as we grow older. And we've also constantly just built our cultural capacity. So, I've known since I was born, I was Kumameri Nunaku. It was just ingrained in me. Our heritage comes on the Gold Coast, where our apical ancestor, which is our full-blood traditional owner from this area, she survived a attempted massacre, and as a result, we believe an Irish settler married her and had a child, and that is where our bloodline stems from in this area. Without that settler marrying and saving our ancestor, we wouldn't be here today. So we always acknowledge all our bloodlines. I have English, Irish and Brazilian bloodlines that I've traced back from my research into my ancestry. And I have very strong connections all along the coastline with a lot of families and groups that work along with my people and help us and support us.
Yeah, and along those lines, for anyone watching who wouldn't know, because we're all over the place, tell everyone about Narangwal and what that is.
So Narangwal started back in 1998 as the Narangwal Lands Council. When Queensland had lands councils, they've all phased out now, and we merged to an incorporated association under Office of Fair Trading. So our main goal is in environmental conservation and cultural heritage preservation of our sites and artefacts. And we are federally funded to manage an Indigenous protected area here on the Gold Coast called Kawanabal. Feel free to check it out on our Facebook page, Narangwal. You can see the work we do. So originally it was just closed off to our Kumameri family lines only, so that we could be locally Aboriginal managed and owned, and that was successful. But I recently, in the last 5 years, took over the role, sadly, because my father passed away from motor neurons disease. So me and my brother stepped up and split his role because we have big shoes to fill. My brother does the native title culture heritage affairs, and I take on the environmental conservation, community liaison, education, and managing the Gowanaba IPA, as well as the administration of the company and accounting and everything else. A lot of hats to wear. So my dad managed the Indigenous protected area 16 years prior to that, and my uncle managed it and secured the land for us prior to that also. So it's been a very male-dominated industry that I've stepped into and successfully merged into, and we changed the area to a women's area from our research and our work, and everything's just blooming wonderfully out on the Indigenous protected area. And it is a private property, but I do invite people out to reach out to our page and arrange a visit to come see our bush tucker trails, our native flora and fauna on site. Give us a hand removing invasive species, like we do toad removals, and remove all the invasive plant species like lantana and other very nasty weeds. But we're getting on top of it, and the site's looking fantastic. We have a freshwater creek with waterfalls, so send us a message. Yeah,
and I've been fortunate enough to actually see it firsthand. Was that a year ago? I feel like 2020 has been 10 years in 1 year. It might have been. It was at that time, I guess. We were talking about the cane toad issue and also the different plants that are there, and replacing the exotic with the invasive with the native plants. What does it look like at this time of year?
Well, spring started early this year, we know that, and we might think that's due to climate change too. We noticed 6 weeks before spring was due to start, flowers are blooming, animals were nesting out on site, so we started to see those changes start early. The water levels, because it's getting hot every day, are starting to drop earlier than usual. Summertime, it's usually end of November, December, we see it drying up very quickly, but it's already started out there. The water levels are dropping. We've got algae blooms starting, which start also in summer from water that's not running fast and in full sun. And we know that not all algae blooms are good for our water system. So we do try and monitor that. If that gets out of control, we'll step up our water quality testing, which we were lucky enough just to receive a local council grant from the catchment management unit to boost our water quality testing abilities and share that with the community as well. So lots has changed since you've been out as well. Everything's just doubled in size, all our plantings along the creek. So we got 2 big grants from state government to plant out and stop the erosion from big flash floods. We get a wall of water. We've got 8 creeks as well as runoff from Tambourine Mountain and an aquifer that fills, and it's just 8 hours of solid rain. There's like a massive, we get re-landscaped every time it floods out there, but it's beautiful, a lot of work. But
and when I was out there, I think it must have been during summer, because we were talking about bushfires. You were noting that the spring has moved, and also the fire season has not only just expanded for a lot of Australia, but it's actually ended up in areas in Queensland where it's not.
Never burnt before.
Do you find that, do people know that? Like, I think we have such a concept that fire and bushland go together sometimes in Australia that we forget that that's not the case for all bushland.
Yeah, well, the fires last year seen areas like Springbrook, our Medicine Man Mountain, burned for the first time ever, the rainforest, which, you know, we've never recorded that before that, I believe. So that was interesting, but we have had a positive from that. I've heard recently from some rangers that there is a lot of beautiful native vegetation has popped up from that. So, you know, fire is not always a bad thing, and that's why we're trying to get involved with cultural burning here with our council and get permissions to start doing cold burning in winter months so we can prep for the hot summer months. So I drive through my city and I'm just like, if this catches alight, these houses are in so much danger because they have started doing what they can when the days allow, but you know, if we could be involved too, we could do a lot more to, you know, identify the areas of need that we know already on our country. But,
and I know that one of the things we've heard from firefighters is that the times of the year when they used to do control burning or to try and get under control some of the, depending on where they are, some of that vegetation has been actually too windy. It's the frames have been pushed, but also do you think that actually this is an opportunity to change things though?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a time for change, that people are grasping onto traditional owner knowledge and management of our country, because we do carry that knowledge of what we need. Like my father used to tell me that fire comes in 10-year cycles in this area, and we should be prepping for that, for a big wildfire every 10 years. And the way to do that is to do the cold burning. And we don't carry that knowledge from our ancestors. So we would have to travel out west or north and learn from our other Aboriginal nations to bring that knowledge home and share that here. You know, there's been a big disconnect in that because we didn't write anything down in our culture. It was all verbal. So, yeah.
And also, I guess, recognizing that even verbal storytelling was, you know, I mean, it was colonizers, white people, actually stopping that and stopping language from, in some circumstances, through stolen generations from continuing and things like that. So, yeah, it is good to know that there are people like you who are able to, you know, yell those stories out loud for everyone to hear though. I think one thing that happened with what have now been called the Black Summer bushfires was that people started to talk more in mainstream. And obviously Aboriginal people, Torres Strait Islander people have been talking about land, sea management for a long time, but I saw it in mainstream Australian media talking about it. Do you think that, like, what do people learning for the first time? Like, what does cultural burning look like, and does that change depending on where you are?
Well, we don't know about this area. We have to learn that still. But I have been watching other tribal nations learn, and ones that have never stopped doing cultural burning, and seeing their methods. And they do have their own way to do it. And it's amazing to watch how some of them, some of the ladies out in the bush walking with their dresses on, just lighting up the grasses. That's their cultural heritage that they carry on for the next generation. And it's something we need to bring back here. Yeah, I think we just got to keep upskilling and learning more. And, I tell everyone I'm learning daily about my dreaming, and I'm still living it and dreaming every day and building my capacity for my culture heritage. Like we've just started weaving groups here to start bringing that back to this area and other things. So, yes.
Yeah. I've just had a question from Ken. He is in the US, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Ken. He says he's on Ohlone native lands. Please correct me about the pronunciation. Ken's asking a question. Could you give some examples of where, people go out to other Aboriginal nations to share best practice to bring back home?
Yeah, so in the 90s, my grandparents had a Aboriginal health service here on the Gold Coast, and they merged into doing cultural heritage activities. So the idea was to start a dance troupe here on the Gold Coast to share our culture in tourism type ventures and other activities and events. So part of that was my grandparents taking my cousins from North Stradbroke Island around to different tribal areas around Australia and learning their song and dance, and asking if we could bring it back home and adapt it to our local area with the few words that we knew. We know there's about 1,000 Kumameri words that we carried on generationally. So we were able to adapt that. And one of the songs is called Garing and Nami, and it's very Australian. It's an Australian-wide song. Every mob, when you hear that, we all start singing along. We know that song. And we're lucky enough to have the permissions from the elders at the time to carry it on, and my uncles, and that still hold that permission, which we still seek to this day. Every time we want to use that, we'll just make sure and check that permission's still in place to use that here. But now we're recovering our language. We want to start learning our own songs. So we had to get a song man to start writing songs for us. Then we've got to start making tunes and dance movements to them related to our local flora and fauna. So yeah, there's a lot for us to work towards. But yeah, we definitely go to other nations. Like I am going up to Darwin tomorrow, and I will spend time with my family and learn about their local culture and the local people there. I will immerse myself. I always try and learn who the traditional owners of the country are that I'm entering. And I always do a little welcome myself to their country, that this is my bloodlines, my ancestry. I'm entering your country. I want to acknowledge your elders. And I want safe passage through country and to get home. And that just gives me a bit of spiritual protection with my dreaming beliefs. Yeah.
And I know, I'm doing acknowledgement of country at the start of the episode, and that happens more and more at events, often like big public events and things like that, acknowledgement of country. But it actually, could you explain about welcome to country and what that is, and that practice between people? Because I acknowledge country because I'm a white person on Aboriginal land here. I can't welcome anyone to it because I'm not a traditional owner. But how does that practice actually help when it comes to sharing and connecting with other nations?
So that was introduced to Australia so that we could start getting people to understand and recognise, there are First Nation people here, and we need to start acknowledging the country, language, people if we can. I've had a few people sat in meetings like, why are we doing this? This is like, why do we have to do this every time? And I've actually turned around and said, because it makes you understand and start to respect that there are First Nation peoples, and we want it to kind of be ingrained in your head constantly that we're here to stay. So at first I used to have a bit of contention about the welcomes, because some people, a lot of people attach the money to the job, whereas I try and go out and do a lot of free community ones, just to share that we're here and work within people's budgets, so they know that, you know, we don't just want a payday out of that. We still want to share and educate the community that we're around. And yes, it's acknowledgements. I have a protocol document I created so that I could share with the community in my area what we expect when they do an acknowledgement, like a guideline for them to work from, so that there's no misconceptions or misunderstandings, that this is what we would prefer you to say if possible. And we also put in there the guidelines behind our welcome, that we would prefer it be a Kumameri person from this area conduct it. If you can't get that, ask an Indigenous person if they're comfortable to do an acknowledgement on behalf of the Kumameri people. If you can't secure a Kumameri person to do it, it's pretty much an acknowledgement in this area. That's what we're pushing for, to take back our integrity and ownership of our culture here.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we talk about things like Aboriginal cultural heritage and First Nations and the relationship with country and people, you know, this is a climate change channel. People might be like, why are we talking about that here? But what would you say to someone who didn't quite understand why, you know, cultural heritage and environmental sustainability go together?
So I usually explain, like, when I talk about country to us isn't just the land, it's the flora, the fauna, the elements like the wind, the rain. We have dreaming stories that connect to just about all those elements, and that connects our people. So, you know, I kind of explain to some people, when we have our totems, and I've got my personal totems, my family totems, my tribal totems, and I've got my father's totems passed down to me when he passed away. And our people build unique relationships with these totems. You know, some of them, it's almost symbiotic, that they will send you a warning, and it kind of, you know, will let you know that something's ahead or something's going to come. It's kind of intuition as well. So they can send signs, signals, warnings, welcomes, you know, entry or non-admittance, like don't go that way sort of thing. And we can be really in tune with those animals. So one of my totems is Kookaburra, and he's my protector guardian bird. And I think I shared with you at Gowanaba, at our Indigenous protected area, from when I started 5 years ago, took over my father's role, that Kookaburra leads me in tree to tree when I'm coming in, and when I'm leaving, he'll lead me out. And now I don't always see him leading me, but he'll dart in front, so I know he's still there leading me in and protecting me, watching over me.
That's so cool.
We also had an incident where we had Mary Gimper, which is our white-bellied sea eagle, relates to our dreaming story for my saltwater dreaming. And he come out to the bush at Gowanaba, and what's he doing out here? And then we all had a laugh, because I said, that's probably my ancestors just checking in on us mob out in the bush, making sure, yeah, we're doing the right thing, which we were planting, but it was just a lovely omen for me to see as well. So, we said, well, like, a lot of information has been lost, so we've had that disconnect. And when I was doing the weaving workshop a month ago with some local women, I was talking about how we've lost that textile production. You know, our people would spend all day gathering resources to build their gunyas and their homewares and, you know, their bush tucker and food. We don't have that now. We go to places, the store, supermarket like Kmart, and buy our clothes.
Sustainable fashion's a new thing.
Yeah, and buy our food and drink. And it's not as hard as it used to be. Like, we don't have to spend all day preparing things just to, you know, have our dinner, whereas our people spent day after day preparing resources. So we have lost our traditional ways, and we slowly, I love that this generation is so open to learning about that and want to attend weaving workshops. I had such a massive response on the Gold Coast to that we have to host more, but I just need more time.
Yeah, there is, and I guess that's the other thing, is remembering sometimes, you know, we talk about sustainable housing, sustainable fashion, all this stuff is post-colonial, because pre-colonization, that was the only kind of housing, clothing, you know. I come from, you know, a world of Western science. That's what I studied, was Western science. And I'm noticing more and more conversations happening where it's like, it's like, oh, look, we've discovered this thing about the stars or about the environment. But then there's a lot of white people, well, some white people starting to cotton on, but there's a lot of Indigenous scientists who are actually out there saying, you know, part of our cultural heritage is science. Part of our storytelling, it may not be called science in the same way, but it is science. How much has storytelling been important to you in learning about the land and managing the land and working with the land?
So, you know, I come from a Catholic upbringing, and it's only been in the last few years working on country that that mindset of mine has changed, and I'm adopting my dreaming beliefs, because the dreaming stories we have here connect so much to the country and our people. It's a bit crazy how much they present to us daily, that there is a real heavy connection working on country, having that ancestral connection. Like, it feels like my ancestors are always walking with me and protecting me. And, you know, I've had little signs where I've had birds or other fauna, even some flora, give signs, or, you know, they'll wave. Or we've had a willy wagtailed warning bird stop in front of me, and I was like, get out of the way, Willie, you know, Gingery. And he wouldn't move, so I drove around him in my truck, and at the end of the gate there was you know, a person that had a few issues with, but and I went, that bird was warning me not to come this way, and the lady next to me was just going, that's crazy, you just said that's a warning bird. I'm like, I should have read that better.
Back home, the willy wagtails are always telling us when there's a snake in the garden.
Yeah.
Which, like, because they wave their tails around, like, if they're
Yeah.
unhappy, they will let you know so visibly.
Yeah, and see, in other tribal areas close to us, that waving is seen as a welcome, a hello, whereas for our people, the physiology we know is they're waving their tail to keep you away from their nest, which means they're feathering you away, warning you, don't go that way. There could be something bad or someone bad that down that path. Don't go there.
Yeah, it's so interesting to also learn about, you know, the way that you've had to deal with this. Cultural heritage was formed when climate crisis was not happening. So a lot of the stories that tell you about when things came into bloom, when, you know, when mating season is for different animals, when, you know, when there is food that changes and things change seasonally. A lot of those stories, and you said that, you know, your father talks about 10-year cycles for fire and things like that. A lot of those things are changing, so that cultural heritage actually gives us tens of thousands of years worth of data. If we want to look at it through that Western lens, it gives us this information where, you know, we know about how much things have changed and will change. I know that apart from fire, though, we have to think about cyclones or hurricanes, and Cyclone Debbie did a bit of damage on the land. Are you worried about this coming season? Because I know we are going into more storms now. Yeah,
we spoke about that last time we caught up, that we've definitely noticed a change in the last 20 years on our side alone, that we used to have a big, massive flood every 3 years, and now we're seeing 3 floods every year. So that's completely, it's changing everything for us. We have to adapt to this constant climate change issues, that, yes, we're getting more floods than ever. We've got council out there fixing the road every time it's washed out, because we need access to go and do our job, weeding and planting and checking on, did our plants survive the flood? Did they help with the erosion? Has it widened more? You know, we won't have access for weeks sometimes, and we have to walk across water that's raging floods, and with backpacks and brush cutters and all our first aid kits and everything, and it's not easy to do. But yeah, you made me think before too, when you said about the relationships, how I mentioned to you too, when we have the bottle brushes here, the orange ones bloom, we know the mullet's running, and when the yellow ones are going, we know the whiting's running. And that's when Dad would drive down one street, see him, or he's like, oh, we're turning around going to get the fishing gear, and we'd have to go straight down for a fish. So yeah, you just made me think of that little story.
Because you've got these like flowers that are signaling when other things available. And I know I had a discussion with a Indigenous astrophysicist once about you know, the emu. And for those who don't know, the night sky in Australia, we can see the Milky Way, and in lots of different Aboriginal cultures, and recognizing there are many different traditions around Aboriginal astronomy, there's an emu. So a lot of people call it gugurman. Is that I don't know if you have a term for the dark emu, but it's actually from the dark spaces between the clouds of stars that form the emu. And she talked about how, because of the rotation of the Earth with the seasons, where the emu is changes, and that depending on that can tell you when the emu eggs are around.
Oh, wow, that's cool. We don't have emus in my area, so I wouldn't know about
yeah, I was just, but the dark emu in the sky, even is it's something that everyone's looking at, but you can apply different shapes and different stories to the same.
I think
sky.
My neighbouring cousins, they call it Dinawan is the word for the emu dreaming. But yeah, we've had stories where, like, we've got the Seven Sisters stories is from Arnhem Land, but I just learnt recently that one of our local suburbs, Wurundjeri, the word for the Seven Sisters is Wangari or something, so it's very similar, and that might be why that suburb, because there's a bit of a peak there, and maybe that's where they could see the stars the best and called it after that area. So we're connecting some areas and dreaming
it's so
stories.
Interesting too, because in some like Western astronomical traditions, they're called Seven Sisters as well. So you've got different people in different places looking at the same sky and having their own take on it, and sometimes they're similar and sometimes they're the same or they're shared. Well, thank
I love
you so much.
hearing the shared Indigenous First Nation stories, because there's other ones too, like Little People. We have that, and our Aboriginal, in our Aboriginal culture, they're like mythical magic men that will come around when, like, you're misbehaving, check on you, kind of thing. And then I've talked to other First Nation cultures in Asia and over in South America, and they have the same stories as us. The Little People, it's freaky. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I just think about like bunyips and things like that.
Yeah. We've got them dreaming stories. We don't go near watering holes and at certain times and things like that. So
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I just noticed that Ken, who asked the question earlier, said that Justine has definitely motivated me to do a nature walk this weekend. No technology. That's awesome. Great, Ken. Look out for
that's great.
Look out for what the nature's telling you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. We're about to roll some credits. If anyone's got any questions on the live chat, please put them in there. And yeah, we'll be back.
Thanks so much, Lee.
Thank you. Okay, we're back. So I think the cool thing is that, sometimes we think about First Nations relationships and you think about Aboriginal culture and things like that, and relationship with the land and with sustainability. Do you ever, is there much discussion in the groups that you are a part of about how, people who have been colonized and invaded have often had really good sustainability practice before colonization, no matter where they are?
Like my family at Straddie, and here on the Gold Coast, they have a lot of like natural resource information. We know that we've got soap bush, which has antibacterial properties to clean us and clean sores. We know we've got fish toxins to help us capture fish in rivers and instead of making fish traps in the salt water. There's so much information. I'm even thinking of pursuing some of my contacts at the local university, the science professors I met recently, to see if they could test some of our theories with bush tucker. So, we tested the native raspberry theory that that is an ailment for IBS, diarrhea, stomach issues. And we're all stay-at-home mums when we started this job. So we tested that plant out and we think that it worked for all our workers. And so we kind of want to see if that
you want to have a collaboration, like
yeah,
Western
we want to see if that
collaboration.
wasn't just a placebo effect for us, that it actually was medicinal.
Yeah.
And there's other things that we want to test. You know, my cousin's invested in the native bees, and he's doing a lot of research and work into that to see how we can bring that back as a remedy as well. You know, I have a lot of my family, my grannies and my aunties would always give us like cod liver oil and all little things and make us try all different seafood, and this is good for you, our mob, and like dugong soup, and I don't like eating dugong. And turtle, you know, turtle's one of my totems, and at a business event like a funeral, we all had a turtle kebab and on a stick, and I had one and I ate it and I instantly didn't, it's not for me because it's one of my totems. I didn't really want to eat it, but my uncle gave it to me, said try this, Barb. Okay, yeah, I probably won't try it again. But I have tried other things like crocodile. That's quite nice. And I said that to my cousins I'm going to see in Darwin. I had little popcorn fried crocodile, and they're like, oh, we would never eat that, that's our totem up here.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I've eaten it, it's not bad.
Yeah, they're like, we'll eat the camels maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because it's this whole thing of obviously taking only what you need and giving back, and all those things have all been part of culture here in Australia for tens of thousands of years. And now it's like, because of colonization and all the things that came with that, now we take more than we need, and most of us don't give any back. How do you kind of I guess balance this whole thing where you're like, normally we would have an abundance of this, but now we don't, and we need to have cultural practices, but we also need to like try and deal with all the new environmental pressures? Is there much I guess pressure around that, or discussion about
there's a lot more discussions around sustainability of our native resources at the moment, which is great. You know, I try and educate people, you tread lightly on country, don't take more than you need. If our people would take enough just for themselves and maybe their family, but you always leave enough for the resource to replenish. You know, we'd take a few berries off the tree, but majority would stay there, so that it can keep propagating, and you know, so the birds also get it and spread that seed along with us, spreading the seed on our country as well. I remember getting in trouble from my uncle, you know, pulling a leaf off a tree too when I was younger, because I used to just, you know, like I fiddle with my hands a lot. So I'd pull a leaf off, and he said, what'd you do that for, bub? I just fiddle. And he's like, no, the tree did nothing to you. You don't need to take from the tree. There was no need. You didn't need that. You wanted it. And, you know, had the big talk about needs versus wants, and don't take it. You didn't need it. You hurt the tree. And like, I felt really bad then. So now I don't do that anymore. I might just like stroke a leaf or pick one up that's floating on the ground instead, and keep my hands busy. But it slowly taught us respect for the flora and fauna. I have a strong love for animals, to the point where my dad had a rule out on our Indigenous protected area. We have wild dog population out there that was a threat originally. Our work on country has redirected their path, so they're no longer a threat, and they know the hierarchy that we're in charge, so they stay away from us. No attacks to date in 22 years. And my father loved animals like I did, and we had pressure from neighbours and council to cull them, kill them and have shooting days. We said no, we don't believe in killing animals, and particularly ones that we believe could have dingo ancestry, because some of the videos we caught,
that's the tough thing, isn't it?
Some have the dingo ears and tail and body shape, but they've interbred with domestic dogs that have been abandoned in the bush as well. Like, I seen a golden retriever running through the wild with the wild dog pack, and I'm like, what's that? And Dad's like, don't call it, it's part of the pack. And yeah, dogs get lost or abandoned, and that wild dog mentality is they got to join or they get killed on the spot, the dogs. So domestic dogs join the wild dog pack most of the time and then breed in with those dingo mixes. And the only way we can find out if, like, we won't cull them, we have collared one of them to track them. The batteries have died, so we need to figure out a strategy to recapture, recollar. But they're very smart, they adapt. So we put trail cameras along where we found a path, we followed a track, and the dogs were sitting there looking at us working at 7 a.m. in the morning, and it was like a father and son watching us because they were exactly the same, just one was smaller, and it was the collared one, the one we had collared. And they looked at my trail camera, and the next day all I could see was their ears. They sniffed out the camera and stayed out of the shot, so they adapted straight away. So we have to keep adapting and moving our camera to monitor where they're going on our site, but they're staying away from us, which is great because we've done that much work. We've made a presence known, we make a lot of noise with our trucks and tools. So yeah.
And hopefully the cane toads are also paying attention because now you've made it hard for them.
Well, we did a big capture last summer where we caught toadlings and trialled 3 different methods to remove the toadlings. And we also did night surveys where we went out and caught a heap of toads, and we're currently bagging them and fridging and freezing them and sending them over to an environmental group, Water Gums, where they cut the toxin off and use that to create a bait to catch the babies. So pheromone trial. But I was out there last Thursday and I was moving some logs, pulling weeds, and found 3 dormant toads. So we bagged them and took them off site. So they are there, they're just hiding, and we're waiting for the hotter months, and we're going to go out and just nab as many as we can to remove them out of our ecosystem completely.
And for those who don't know, who are watching, look up cane toads in Australia. Obviously cane toads do have a place where they're from and where they live in harmony with the environment, but it's not here. It's very much the opposite, and very much a threat to native Australian animals as well. Yeah.
Especially to our native frogs. They eat our native frogs, they eat our other species in the creek, and they will eat the babies, like, so they'll stop the breeding cycle of our native frogs. So that was what my strategy at our area was, to plant those Lamandra matrush grass species along the creek. So that is an erosion barrier, but doubles up as a toad strategy. So the native frogs that we have in Australia can jump right over them grass trees, whereas the non-native toads, they can't jump that high. They get stuck and they will try and find another way, or hopefully they get stuck and can't go, and we can go and pick up their carcasses and remove it off the area.
Well, I'm glad to hear that things are, I mean, it's a hard problem. It's a huge problem that so many different people working with so many different methods. I really I commend you all on your hard work on your land, on your country, because you can see the results from going out there. And I'm sure, like you said, everything's grown so much since I was out there. So thanks so much for giving us your time today. And I really appreciate it, and all the best. And enjoy your trip to Darwin as well.
Thank you. We're just looking up some fancy places on Instagram to go and check out while we're up there.
Yes, make sure you look after yourself. Like we were just talking earlier this morning with Katarina Gator about the importance of looking after yourself if you're looking after, the planet, the environment, and you're looking after a lot of people and places. So
yes, it's very important. Thank you so much for having me today, Lee, and thanks everyone else tuning in.
No worries. Yeah, feel free to log off and go about your holiday plans. Thank you so much, Justine. We'll catch you later.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
There you go, Justine Dillon. So that's it for me from Climate Australia for now, but I will be back next week. I'll just check the schedule right now. Next week, I will have a chat coming up about, we're going to have someone on to talk about farming. Here we are, Jenny Metcalf. She'll be on to talk about farmers as climate change champions and about her role in using relationships with farmers to have really impactful conversations about climate change. So thanks very much, everyone. I'll let you know when more episodes are coming up, and there will be more on the horizon. Have a lovely end to your week or weekend, depending on where you are. Bye.